There is this really amazing humble bundle going on right now for 3D sculpting and character mastery. I have definitely already gotten it, because if you've checked into any of my recent live streams, you'll see that I've been working on this kind of stuff, and that I kind of am not great at it. So this having a bunch of both educational content and also then a lot of tools that you can actually use is perfectly timed for me to get it. So I figured, let's share this, because if I'm having trouble with this, there's a good chance that you guys are also having trouble with this. So let's go over the different sized bundles, because as always, there's 3 tiers. The 7-item bundles for about €9, or your original equivalent, which will include concept sculpting for film and games, sculpting Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet, which is a pretty good mix actually of normal like organic character shapes and then some hard surface stuff. So I think that this is going to be insanely valuable. Concepting in Marvelous and Zbrush. This one I don't think I particularly care about, but if you're interested in the Marvelous designer, that might be a nice bonus. You will note that a lot of this stuff is very Zbrush focused. In one of the other bundles, there's also something that's specifically aimed toward Blender. And a lot of the things like the alpha mats that you get in some of these bundles are of course usable in anything that just takes in a PNG. But then we have this thing which teaches you how to sculpt a bunch of facial features. So things like eyes and ears and mouths and noses. Things that your character is usually going to need at least a few of, right? Then we have sculpting both a male and a female face. So there's a little bit of anatomy difference between the two of them, of course. So following both of them will probably get you familiar with the differences in how to sculpt things that are like a little bit more angular, generally, right, for male features, and a little softer for female features. And then probably the most important part of this 7-item bundle, which will be the introduction to Zbrush, because everything else, again, here is very Zbrush based. So going over the introduction to Zbrush, learning how to work with the software, it's really, really good software, is probably going to be instrumental if you don't already know how to use Zbrush. But if you do have interest, this should suffice getting you started. This is a bundle by the people from Flip Normals, and they always have really, really good content for educational purposes and learning 3D art related stuff. So moving on to the 13-item bundle, where we left off from the introduction to Zbrush. Now we're getting into some things that are about like hand painting skin textures. And now we're moving from just the geometry in Zbrush into, hey, we also are now using Substance Painter, which the two of those go together in a workflow very, very well. You can get very high detailed meshes out of Zbrush, which will need to be retopologized, and then combining that into Substance Painter and then starting to actually paint in the textures and stuff can be really, really cool. So it's really nice that they throw in some texture related stuff too. Then here we have an entire course that is based around character sculpting. It seems like you'll be sculpting a Frankenstein's monster, which is, I think, pretty good because it's still rather humanoid, but we're moving away from fairly like generic male-female faces. So there's a little bit more creativity that you can implement here. And that's probably a good step after you've completed some of this stuff. Kind of similar to Thanos, right? This is still fairly humanoid, but you're able to introduce some of your own interpretations a little bit more. And here we start getting into not just learning material, but actual like tools to use. So we have 50 plus face VDMs. So these are brushes that you can use within Zbrush to just plop down an ear or a nose or a mouth onto your character without having to go through and manually model the entire thing every time. Because sometimes just throwing on an ear and calling it a day, and then maybe even detailing on top of that, of course, is really all that you need. Next up, we have the anatomy bust, which is honestly just a good thing for like referencing. If you want to make very realistic looking humans, you need a reference for like how the face actually is constructed and what like muscles do and where muscles go. This is a more highly technical thing. Personally, the things that I tend to make don't really like approach this level of realism, so I don't mind this being in here or not, but it's a nice to have, I suppose. And finally, we've had a lot of Zbrush related stuff, but here, as one of the last things in the 13 item bundle, we have a introduction to sculpting in Blender. So if you don't feel like getting a Zbrush subscription, you can just follow this one and work within Blender. And again, there's going to be, in I think the 21 item bundle, there's going to be some alpha mats and stuff, and those are effectively just image files that you can import into any software. And for the 18 euros, or again, whatever your regional equivalent is, I think just this one would also be worth it. The MSRP for it is about $45, so you're still getting a good deal, even if you don't use all the Zbrush related stuff. And hey, maybe once you're done learning about sculpting in Blender, you might think, hey, maybe I should give Zbrush a try sometime in the future, and then you have all of this learning material about Zbrush already ready to go. And then we have this other introduction to sculpting. This is not marked as being Zbrush, unlike everything down here. So it seems like this is a more generalized introduction to what sculpting is and how to set it up in your workflow, how to work with it. So again, this is probably also fine if you work within Blender. Lastly, we have the 21 item full bundle for about 22 to 23 euros, or whatever that relates to in your regional equivalent. And here we have the creature kit to start up with. So this is a kit filled with a bunch of brushes that are a little bit more like fantasy creature based. So included 170 hand sculpted and carefully crafted brushes to satisfy every need in the creature design process. So this very much is a ZBrush based thing. So if you're a Blender user, maybe this is not that good for you, but it's another one of those things that's it's $100 usually, and the entire bundle goes for under 23. And then we have the alpha mats that I've been talking about the entire time. We've got 90 plus alpha mats, and this is, as you can see, not marked as particularly a ZBrush thing, because an alpha mat is usually just a JPEG or a PNG that you can just import into whatever you want. So you can see here supported software, ZBrush, Blender, Substance Painter, but I imagine that they might also even work within Photoshop, because again, it is just an image file usually. But even aside from that, it is guaranteed to work within Blender. So if you are somebody who uses Blender because it is free and because you're used to it, this face kit is also going to work, and you have a lot of alpha mats to use in your sculpting within Blender as well. Then we have the skin kit. This is more so based on Substance Painter, it seems like, for the texturing purposes, which is also really quite nice. 42 hand sculpted skin maps, 12 tileable skin maps, instructions for ZBrush, custom ZBrush macros and UI, and a ZBrush installation video, so you're not going to be confused as to how to actually use them. We have an eye kit, which just gives you eyes in a variety of colors. I, again, can't say that I personally care too much about this, but that is mostly because most of the things that I make approach more so this than they do this. So I don't know how particularly useful this is for me, but if you're more inclined toward humanoid characters, it might be nice to have. Then we have another course for the first time in a couple of entries here, and this is entirely a course based on character faces regarding texturing them in Substance Painter, because getting a character's face to actually look good and work well goes beyond just having good geometry for them. Having a good looking skin and like all of the detailing that you see here, like these scars, all that is like texture based stuff, and this is a course that's going to go through all of that. Then we're going to talk about the introduction to anatomy first, because it feels like this is one of those things that you're probably going to want to watch before one of these other two. These two are really like the amazing, like high-end selling point of this bundle. Everything that we've talked about so far already was more than worth it. These last two are fantastic. But before that, you probably do want to look at an introduction to anatomy, because if you're modeling entire characters, having some sense of like how a body's anatomy works again, this is fairly humanoid based, of course, is probably a good thing. But once you've done that, we can go on to creating a full character in Zbrush, which is an entire workflow course to make a character in Zbrush. It is an 18-hour course, so there is a lot of information there. There's a lot of content there. And to complement that, we also have a character portrait masterclass. So this is only for like a bust. This one is for a full character. Of course, the combination of the two makes it even more insightful and even better to go through. So there's a lot of learning content here, but there's also a lot of like actually usable tools and content that you can use even if you already are very familiar with Zbrush. And even as a Blender user, I would argue that the bits that you get that work with Blender by themselves should be worth it. So if you want to pick this up, like I already did, I am, as we speak, downloading all of this content. There's quite a lot of it, because a bunch of it is video-based, of course. There will be a link down below in the description to this bundle. As of the time of recording this, there's 14 days left. It's probably going to be a few days before I upload this video. So by the time this goes up, there should be about 10 or so days left in this bundle to get it. And again, for under 25 euro or dollar or whatever your regional equivalent is, this is an absolute steal. So if you're like me and you're trying to improve your skills in 3D art and then specifically into sculpting, go check it out. And a very big thank you to all of my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help out supporting the channel, there's a link down below in the description to the Patreon page. A huge thank you to my Cave Student tier supporters, Earl Monseval Erno, and my Cave Digger tier supporters, Sir J. Thomas,